to remove the veterans, the president, Herbert Hoover, sent the United States Army. He sent the U.S. Army to evict hungry, desperate veterans from the nation's capital. And as the army moved through the streets of D.C., they fired tear gas at these men who had served their country in war. Tanks and machine guns rolled through the streets of the nation's capital. And when the army got to that tent city that they had built along the river, they set it on fire and destroyed the last possessions that these families had left. So I don't know if you've seen the theme here in the last few slides. No bonus, no bonus, no bonus, no bonus. There will be no bonus. Instead, the tent city was destroyed. An infant had been burned up in the fire. Their parents hadn't been able to rescue their infant from the tent. An 8-year-old boy had been shot and killed. And lots of veterans were wounded. Yeah, a tent city. T-E-N-T, a tent, like the thing you go camping in.
Oh, a tent, okay.
Yeah. In the face of all this, President Hoover defended what he had done. Hoover said these were not patriotic veterans who wanted a bonus early. They were communists. A dangerous communist mob trying to overthrow the federal government. The problem for President Hoover was that the American people weren't buying that. They just didn't believe it. Because these were veterans that they had shot at and burned down their tents. Veterans. And really, what the bonus march did is doomed Hoover's chances for re-election. He already didn't have much of a chance, because who did people blame the Depression on? Right. But then he had the army basically kill a couple kids in the nation's capital, right? And burn down these veterans' property. So which party will be back in power in 1932?
Democrats.
Right. This is from 1928, when Hoover became president, before the Great Depression. And remember, which party is supposed to always win the South?
Democrat.
Right. Remember, the Democrats are supposed to always win the South, right? But here, the Republicans actually won a bunch of the southern states. So back before the Great Depression, it had looked like the Democrats were in trouble. What's the 1932 map going to look like?
Like everything going to be green.
Right. You got it. There's 1932. Let's just compare again real quickly. 1928, before the Great Depression. 1932, after. This was the biggest political swing in American history. You know, from one party controlling things to the other. Which party now had big majorities of the House and Senate? The Democrats. Right. But even amid this big wave for the Democrats, 2/3 of black voters voted for Hoover for re-election. Now, black voters at this point is black adults where? In the North. Right. 2/3 of black voters voted for Hoover. Why?
They didn't feel like believe that Democrat can really change.
Exactly. Because they have voted Republican ever since Lincoln, right? Ever since Reconstruction. And do they trust a Democrat who, from their experiences down south, remember the Democrats are the party of who? The Klan. Right. So do they trust a Democratic president? No. And they voted for Hoover. Now that new Democratic president who won in 1932 was Franklin D. Roosevelt. most Americans would come to know him by his initials as FDR. So I'll call him FDR a lot, because people did at the time. But he was Franklin Roosevelt. Roosevelt was not from the southern wing of the Democratic Party. He was from New York. As a New York politician, he was not any kind of like violent or mean or overt white supremacist. He wasn't. He had a kind of vague feeling of superiority to black people, but really, he felt that towards almost everybody, because he was rich, and he thought that his family were better than most people. All right, but not, you see what I'm getting at? You know, he's not like a Southern Democrat at all. In fact, would he be opposed to helping black people? No. No. The problem for him as president is, whose votes does he need to get any law passed?
What? Like
Which
what?
ones?
Everybody.
Who's the base of his party?
The Southern.
Exactly. So to get any federal law passed, he needs Southern Democrats to support it. And what's the only way they'll support it? What does it have to do?
Hate black.
Exactly. It has to discriminate against black people. So that's the position that he'll find himself in as president. He's not personally opposed to helping black people, but in order to get anything passed, he needs the Southern Democrats in the Congress to approve it. FDR came to office promising what he called a New Deal for the American people. During the campaign, when he was running against Hoover, he never even explained what this New Deal meant. He didn't have to. Did people like the current deal?
No.
No. So if you promise people a new deal, that sounded pretty good. FDR came to office and promised the American people, we, the Democrats, we will try things. We will not sit here and wait for things to get better. Like who did? Right. We will try things. So like this cartoon has it over here. FDR says, you wanted action? We'll give you action. We'll do stuff. In the first 100 days of his presidency, Congress passed more laws in 100 days than they ever had in an entire 2-year period. That's an active federal government, right? More laws in 100 days than Congress had ever made in a full 2 years. And you may have learned about some of this at some point in your education. A lot of this is the alphabet soup of New Deal programs with different acronyms like the AAA, the PWA, the WPA, the CCC, the TVA. We don't need details about most of these. We just need to understand the dynamic that was at work here. And the basic dynamic to understand then is this. FDR and the Democrats were making new government programs to try to help people. Right? To actually try to help people who are unemployed and suffering. As they're making all these programs, what do the Southern Democrats helping to write the laws want to make sure of? You got it. All right. So if we just take one specific example, we can use that to stand in for all these programs. All right? So the program we'll use as our example is the CCC. That was the Civilian Conservation Corps. A government program that took unemployed, shirtless men, sorry, that's not the shirtless part, I just realized that everybody up here was shirtless. It took young, unemployed men from the cities and put them to work. In the countryside, doing work that we might think of as like environmental work. So they did things like they planted trees, they cleaned beaches, they tried to improve the soil, environmental work. Taking 1 million unemployed men out of the cities improved conditions in the cities because there were less unemployed men hanging around the cities. Crime rates went down because guess what? Through all of human history, groups of unemployed young men get involved in
Crime.
crime. Right. Really didn't think that one was hard. Crime. Right. So they take these young unemployed men from the cities, bring them out to the countryside, put them to work. All right. Now, as this program was being written in the Congress, some northern politicians said, well, we should set up the camps so that any American man can have a job in the camps. And what did those Democrats from Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi say?
Make sure there are no white, no
Right.
black.
Exactly. But there were politicians from the North who said, no, this program should help black people too. So the program included the CCCC. That was the Colored Civilian Conservation Corps, where this federal government program created segregated camps. And they put black people to work doing the same kinds of work that the white men were doing, but in segregated camps. Hmm? Who liked it this way? Those Southern Democrats. Right. Now, remember, black people were unemployed at a much higher rate than white people, right? So if the program was administered fairly, would they get more jobs? They would, right? Because they're in greater suffering. They didn't. They got less jobs than they should have. In fact, they only got 5% of all the jobs through the program. And they were about 14% of the population. 5% of the jobs. And what was true here for the CCC was true for other programs in the New Deal. So, for example, there was another program called the National Recovery Administration, the NRA. Black people often called it Negroes Ruined Again, or the Negro Runaround, because it was set up in a way that it could discriminate against black people. And this was true in all these programs. They were all federal programs set up in a way to discriminate against black people. But here's the weird thing. Were the Democrats helping black people more than the Republicans had?
Yes.
Yes. And that's bizarre, right? In general, do Democrats like black people less than Republicans? Yes, Democrats do like black people less than Republicans. But their philosophy towards government is different, right? Their philosophy towards government is we can help people through the government. And so it helps black people a little bit.